Woo! Time to get cooking.
Hello everybody and welcome to Fossil Friday Chats. Happy holidays. I'm Brittney Stoneburg from the Western Science Center. With me as always is my co-host Gabriel Santos.
Hello everybody, welcome to my home.
And joining us today for a very special episode is Dr. Jessie Atterholt. Dr. Atterholt is from Western University of Health Sciences and is a paleontologist, an anatomist, and an educator. And today, we're going to be going all into some holiday mayhem with dissecting an actual dinosaur. Woo!
So, Dr. Atterholt, for those of you, we're very good friends with Dr. Atterholt, and we are going to have some fun today. So, also, we are pre-recording this, and because it's currently the end of October, and apparently turkeys are not yet ripe, we will be doing a chicken.
Yes, the turkeys were not in season quite yet.
So, Dr. Atterholt, this is a chicken, but we're calling it a dinosaur dissection. Why is that?
Well, Gabe, that's because all birds, not just chickens and turkeys, are actually like the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren of dinosaurs, specifically theropod dinosaurs, so the ones in the group like T-Rex and Allosaurus. So all birds are also technically dinosaurs, just like you're a person, because you came from your grandparents who are people, right? And even though you might not think that a chicken has much in common with the anatomy of something like a T-Rex, there's actually a lot of cool little interesting features of its anatomy that are very similar. And we're going to be able to see some of those today. Some of them we can't see yet. So for instance, one thing that we now know birds had in common with dinosaurs are feathers. Both groups, or both, even a lot of our extinct dinosaurs had feathers. They also had scales, and if you take a look at a bird foot, and unfortunately our chicken doesn't have its feet anymore. They've been cut off, but the scaly part's missing. But if you look at a bird foot, they're all scaly and they have long claws. You really are seeing that reptilian ancestry there. You can see that that's the foot of a little tiny cute dinosaur. And I'll point out some other features that birds have in common with dinosaurs as we go along with our dissection.
Cool.
Awesome.
So should we get cooking?
I think we should.
Well, as many of you may know, if you've ever bought a whole chicken from the grocery store, oftentimes they come with additional parts stuffed inside the body cavity. So it was just kind of like Christmas and a surprise seeing what they put in this chicken. And there are no giblets, none of the internal organs, unfortunately, but we do have a little chunk of neck, which may seem superficially not very exciting at all, but even on this small little chunk of neck, we're already seeing some very interesting features of birds, and again, more really cool stuff that they have in common with dinosaurs. So I'm holding up one end of the neck right here, and
there we go.
You can see it. We're looking at the neck in cross section. So there's muscle, neck muscle all around it. That's our outermost layer. The skin has been removed. And then these bits, those kind of off-white parts, are actually bone. So that is the cervical vertebra, the part of the spinal column that's found in the neck. And that vertebra itself has been chopped in half. So we can actually see inside of the bone. And if you look really closely and you squint your eyes at that bone, it looks almost like a sponge. It has a whole bunch of tiny little air spaces inside of it. And our fancy term for that is called pneumaticity.
Bless you.
Thank you. So much of the bird's skeleton is pneumatic. That means it has holes in it, air holes. And that's actually because parts of the bird's respiratory system have invaded the skeletal system, which is super crazy and super cool. But even more cool is the fact that we see that same evidence of pneumaticity in dinosaur bones too. So we know that birds and dinosaurs have this very special, very weird respiratory system that involves invasion of the skeletal system sometimes. And then we can also see the spinal cord tucked down in there. That's the center of the vertebra where the spinal cord lives.
So is there a particular reason for the bones to be so pneumatic?
Great question, Brittney.
I have those sometimes.
Let me explain a little bit more about what causes it, actually. So birds have lungs, just like mammals do, just like we do. But in addition to lungs, they have this elaborate system of what we call air sacs that spread throughout their body. So you can kind of think of them as just these thin membranous sacs, almost like balloons, that are found everywhere in a bird's body. You can find them between skin and muscle, in between muscles, in the side of bones, and even sometimes inside of the vertebral canal where the spinal cord lives. So they're very extensive in most modern birds. And the skeletal evidence of fossil dinosaurs tells us they were very extensive in many of them as well, specifically theropod dinosaurs, the ones like T-Rex, and sauropod dinosaurs, the long-necked ones. So in birds, this skeletal pneumaticity makes a lot of sense because birds want to lighten their skeletons to be able to fly better, right? They want to have not a lot of extra weight. So it just worked out for birds. They got lucky in their evolution. And this particular feature, the skeletal pneumaticity, the little holes in the bones, helps them to lighten their skeletons. But for something like a T-Rex or a Brachiosaurus, they're not flying, so why would they be?
What?
And it is thought that, at least in the case of especially sauropod dinosaurs, because they're so massive, it was helpful for them to be able to lighten their skeletons just because of their sheer size.
Oh, cool.
Can I get that?
I know, right?
Because I hate that scale. Anyway.
So maybe we can, maybe later we'll cut away some of the muscle from the side of the neck and be able to see more evidence of that pneumaticity. And you might be wondering, oh, well, why aren't we seeing any of the air sacs yet? Because in real life, there would be air sacs running just parallel to the neck right here. And the reason for that is that these sacs are so thin. Remember I said they're kind of like balloons. When the animal dies, they're one of the first things that really deteriorate unless you're trying to preserve them. So they're pretty tough to see in most dissections.
If you're hearing that weird pattering noise, that's my dog walking around. He's very intrigued at what we're doing right now.
We have a special guest today.
I'll bring him up later, okay?
Probably waiting for some chicken. Yeah, exactly.
And we won't be wasting this. I'm going to be making a beautiful soup stock from it, so I'm actually hungry.
I know. Me too. You should make chicken noodle soup.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
Done.
Quite seasonal.
Plans for after this.
Alright, so what are we doing right now?
Well, the first thing I like to do whenever I'm dissecting is just skin the animal. And it's kind of sad that we don't have the feathers to show you some cool features of feathers. Sorry, the dog is licking my foot now, and it's ever so slightly distracting.
Roxas.
So no feathers, but we're going to go ahead and take the skin off so that we can see some of the superficial muscles before we cut them away.
And we are trained professionals, specifically Dr. Atterholt.
Yes.
I used to do dissections back when I was in biology.
I have done defleshing myself at the museum.
Yeah, so please don't attempt this at home.
Scalpels are sharp.
And as you can see, I actually just switched to holding the skin away with these fancy little rat tooth forceps, so I can grab it and hold it and keep my fingers far away from the sharp tip of the scalpel.
But if you are interested in doing dissections, I would recommend trying to find like a class or something to do it, because dissections are fun.
Yes, they are.
And actually, after I went inside, it's really hard to see air sacs. We are seeing some of that air sac tissue a little bit here.
Ooh.
So this stuff that looks kind of very light and airy, almost cobwebby, can I say? I'm trying to get that on camera well. Is that showing up?
A little bit. Let's turn it. Let's turn it around this way. There we go.
There we go.
Now you can see it.
Now you can see it.
So this stuff in here is going to be some of that air sac, and as you can see,
cool.
I'm already puncturing it. It's going away.
So how does that air sac fill? Is it? You said it's connected to the respiratory system?
It's connected to the lungs. Yeah. So in humans or mammals, we breathe air in, and then we breathe it out. We breathe it in and out, but it doesn't go in and out of the lungs like that. It just flows in one direction over the lungs. So they breathe in, and it goes over the lungs, through the lungs, and then it goes through the air sacs, and then eventually back out through the trachea.
Is that more efficient?
Yes, it is more efficient, and it is a great way of breathing if you're doing something that is using a lot of oxygen, like flying. Flying would be like if we wanted to run around all the time. It uses up a lot of energy and a lot of oxygen.
I barely run.
Yeah, same.
So we're seeing, speaking of flying, the very first thing, actually let's orient ourselves. Let's take a moment.
Yes.
So we're looking at this chicken in what we would call ventral view. That's our fancy word for it. So ventral means stomach. So this is the stomach side of the bird. The other side is called dorsal, which means back, right? Like a dorsal fin on a dolphin or a shark. So this is our ventral view. And this is toward the head. So this is what we would call the cranial end. This is toward the tail. So we call it the caudal end. Caudal means tail. And here's the chicken's legs and the wings.
Do a little dance.
So the first thing we see on the chicken, and really the most prominent feature when you look at the ventral surface of any bird, are these massive muscles right here. So most of this is the pectoralis major muscles of the bird. So when you eat chicken breast, that's what that is. It's these big muscles. And the reason the muscles are so huge is because they're responsible for the downstroke during flight, or the power stroke. So when the bird...
It's okay.
I don't want to interface with my chicken breast. Sorry guys. When the bird beats its wings down, then that's what those muscles are for. So we'll dissect those away and take a look at some other cool stuff underneath them a little bit later.
Now, chickens are they? I grew up thinking chickens are flightless, but they're not really, right?
No, they're not. Yeah, they're not going to go for a super long flight per se, but they absolutely can get a quick little flap in. Actually, that's something else that's really cool. So I think when you eat chicken breast, you think of that as the white meat, right? The reason that is white meat is because it's called fast twitch muscle. So this is muscle that is evolved for very, very rapid but also brief periods of movement. So it's the same reason that a fish, for instance, like a halibut, is also white meat. Halibut's mostly just sitting still on the bottom of the ocean, but then now and then it's going to exert a very fast and brief burst of energy to try to catch food or maybe run away from something trying to eat it. So same thing with the chicken breast. Dark meat that it's darker in color, right? It's more red. That is slow twitch muscle. It's evolved for longer periods of slightly less intense movement. So that's what we see in the legs of the chicken, just kind of walking around, hanging out every day. Or again, to think about it in terms of fish, that's why a tuna usually will have very dark meat. Tunas just spend their whole time swimming around in the ocean.
So do you think a dinosaur, perhaps like T-Rex, would be mostly white or dark meat?
I would guess probably mostly dark meat, because they're spending most of I think they're spending most of their time moving around.
Oh, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out what they taste like. We always joke it tastes like chicken, but because chicken is a dinosaur, that's probably the general taste, you would say, maybe?
I think so. I'm trying to think of, I mean, people eat alligator, right?
I've had alligator.
I've had alligator.
And it did taste like chicken.
Exactly, yeah. So a quick brief tangent about that. If we think about the closest living relatives of dinosaurs, we said that birds are essentially their ancestors, so we know that they're a very close relative. But on the other end of things, their closest living cousins, we might say, are alligators and crocodiles. So if we want to get a sense of what extinct dinosaurs taste like, then we can eat birds and we can eat alligators and crocodiles. And I think it says a lot that alligator actually does taste a lot like chicken.
I had a fried gator when we were in, not Florida, Texas maybe? I don't remember where we were, but it was good. I liked it.
I've had gator jerky. It
Ooh.
was delicious.
Oh.
I think I've only tried fried as well. Yeah, I didn't know they made it. Was delicious?
Yeah, it was really good actually.
Interesting.
We're hungry.
Yeah. We're filming this before lunch, so apologies.
When you're taking off the skin, there's like another layer of tissue beneath that connects it to the muscles, right? It doesn't just slide off as we're kind of seeing.
It does not slide off, yes. Great observation, Gabe. So just underneath the skin, superficial to the muscles, that in-between layer, we have two types of connective tissue. One of those is called fascia. So the fascia is this clear, slimy stuff that we can see here. Fascia is almost like the glue that holds everything in your body together. So even though there's fascia that's helping to connect the skin to muscle, there's still fascia that's covering these muscles. So fascia will bind muscles together into what we call compartments, and bind individual muscles. So a huge part of dissection is just getting through that connective tissue that we call fascia, which can actually be quite fibrous and tough to get through at times. As we can see, I'm really pushing with my finger there and it's not doing much. And then the other connective tissue that's just beneath our skin, which we are all unfortunately familiar with, is fat. So right here, for instance, we have a whole bunch of fat on this chicken. The chicken's not super fatty, right? We see there's a little bit right here on top of those pectoralis muscles, on top of the breast meat, and a little bit here on top of the thigh. But otherwise, there's not a whole lot on the outside. There's more inside. We'll talk about that later.
It's called flavor.
Mm-hmm. So I am cutting away some fat here so we can see the muscles a bit better.
Let's see, bring back my biology training. That's adipose cells.
Correct. Yeah. Good job, Gabe.
I have a degree in biology. Somewhere.
Adipose cells are so full of fat. They're just like little tiny sacs full of fat that the nucleus of the cell gets shoved way to the side of it.
That's like me. So, Jessie, how long have you been doing dissections?
Well, Gabe, I first got interested in comparative anatomy when I was a volunteer paleontologist in Borrego Desert State Park. I began doing that when I started my volunteer work when I was 9, and around age 11 I got involved with helping to work on specimens for their comparative collection. So you may be wondering, I was introduced to you as a paleontologist and anatomist, so if I study things that are fossils, why do I also study the anatomy of something that's still alive today? And the reason for that is because the anatomy of things that's still alive today can be very helpful in our interpretations of the anatomy of extinct things. So when I first started doing dissections, it really wasn't, I can't lie, it wasn't so much dissection, it was more just like a skinning and gutting. I was helping to skeletonize different animal donations that we would get from zoos or from roadkill, and we would use those in Borrego to help us use the bones of modern animals to help us identify the bones of fossil animals that we would find.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. So the bones of modern animals are very helpful, but also the soft tissue of modern animals is very helpful, because when we find traces of that soft tissue on the bone, for instance, with the pneumaticity that I mentioned, right? The holes in bones that are very characteristic of that special weird avian respiratory system, that tells us about the respiratory system of something that's extinct, like a big sauropod dinosaur.
Science.
Mm-hmm. We do something similar at the Western Science Center. We have a domestic beetle colony that can help us skeletonize modern animals, because we have a large Pleistocene collection, so we have a lot of Ice Age animals that have modern analogs, and so it's very helpful to have those animals on hand with their bones to be able to say, oh, okay, when we find a fossil, we can say we have a modern bone equivalent and we can see exactly what kind of bone it is.
I wish we did, but we do not, because we don't have space. But also, in the world of collections, having domestic beetle colonies in your facility is it's a little bit of a risk, because if a single one of those domestic beetles gets out, they can destroy entire collections, because they will eat modern, what are they called, taxidermied specimens.
Yeah, they'll eat anything.
They'll eat anything they can get their hands on.
So we keep our domestic beetle colony far away from the collections, and we keep them actually in a in a hood. So if they do escape, they can't get out of the room.
I think, guys, have you mentioned what exactly domestic beetles are?
Yeah, so domestic beetles are actually a flesh-eating beetle. They live in colonies that can skeletonize bodies. It's quite amazing and fascinating to watch, actually.
Would they try to eat us if they were here?
Not if we were still alive.
That's not what I saw in the mummy. But they're actually really cute. They're like this. They're
so
they're
tiny. They're very small.
I wanted to have my own in my house one time, but then I realized like you have to actually like feed them meat constantly, otherwise the colony will collapse.
Yes. When we do not have animal remains to give them for the actual collection, we just feed them our table scraps.
I don't have table scraps. I eat it all.
Or it goes to Roxas.
Yeah, it goes to Roxas. He's back here just waiting for a piece of chicken to fall.
Please.
You had your own domestic colony for a little bit, right?
I did, yeah. I had my own domestic colony for years when I was a kid, actually.
Oh, so cool.
Because I got into this stuff pretty early, and so my mom helped me find someone who gave us some domestids, and we had a barn, so they lived in the barn in their nice big tank, and I would feed them roadkill and little dead things that people would give me because people knew what I did, so they would bring me stuff. It was great.
Isn't Dr. Atterholt just the coolest?
I know. What a cool childhood.
I had really amazing parents, let's just say that. They even bought me my own little freezer for dead things.
That's so cute.
So we didn't have to keep them in the home freezer.
Yeah. So if you're one of those little girls out there who is interested in finding dead things and someone's making fun of you, tell them, hello, it's cool.
It's very cool.
But also make sure you get your parents' permission before you start storing dead things in the freezer. I didn't, and I got in trouble.
Yeah, I definitely had a roommate once who got a surprise when she opened our freezer one day. It's like, whoops, did I forget to mention that?
Okay, I think we're at the point where we can start talking about some muscles.
Cool.
So, we have the large pectoralis muscles right here, 2 of them, a right and a left. And then down here, my hand is inside of the body cavity. So there's a very thin muscle that we're seeing right here, and that's actually the oblique muscles of a bird, just like we have obliques too. It's actually 3 layers of muscle with fibers oriented in different directions for strength. So in a bird, these muscles don't have to be super strong or super thick, and in fact you can see the black of my gloves through that muscle, but these are helping to form part of the body wall. And then we have some really nice definition of different muscles here on, this is the thigh of the chicken, so all of these muscles are inner muscles of the thigh, and here we're looking at the shin, you could say, of the chicken. So we'll get to that in a little bit. So, can you push that?
Yes.
Like that, thank you, Brittney. We're now looking at the muscles of the thigh. So this is that inner view of your thigh. So a lot of these muscles, their job is going to be what we call adduction, bringing the thighs together. So when you do go to the gym and you use the machine, you're working your inner thighs and doing this, that's what a lot of these muscles do. So this is the adductor longus, this big fat one here. We also have an adductor longus. Here are some other smaller adductor muscles. This muscle right here is quadriceps femoris. So that muscle is actually the top muscle of the thigh. So when you think of your thighs, that's the muscle you think of. It's the big fat muscle on the front surface of your thigh. It's actually a series of 4 little muscles that all go together. Quadriceps femoris, quads, right? That's your quads. And then back here, we have the hamstrings of the chicken. So that is going to be our biceps femoris group, these big muscles back here. So even though it is a chicken, there are actually a lot of muscles in common with humans. And based on the features of the bones where these muscles attach to, we can infer that these muscles were also present in extinct dinosaurs. So that's our inner part of the thigh. So I've been working on dissecting the wing of the chicken, and this is the wing in that dorsal view, the back view. And you may have noticed that throughout the dissection, yes, I do use the scalpel, especially for skinning, that initial step. But now that most of the skin is gone, I'm kind of putting the scalpel aside and abandoning it. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize about dissection. But the scalpel should not be your go-to dissection tool or your primary dissection tool. So my favorite dissection tools are those rat tooth forceps I mentioned, sharp pointed scissors, and actually my fingers. You'd be surprised the amount of stuff that you can do with your fingers. So what I'm doing now is just separating muscles from each other and removing fat and fascia that is blocking the view of those muscles.
The makeup YouTubers.
So this is his
Just like a makeup tutorial.
Why not?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're looking at the chicken in dorsal view. So this is the chicken's back. This direction is toward the chicken's head up here, and this direction is the chicken's butt. So here is the thigh, and you can see there's most of the thigh muscles are on this surface, right? There's lots of really, really big ones. There's a huge muscle, one border of it is here, and then it goes down to the knee of the chicken, and then it's going all the way back here. So it's connecting two major parts of the chicken's body. It's connecting to the tibia down here, which is that shin bone. So we can see it at the knee, that's top of the tibia. And it's attaching to the ilium up here, which is part of the hip bone. So it's called the iliotibialis. So in anatomy, the names of muscles oftentimes will give you a nice clue about their identity and what they're attaching to. So this is going to be a muscle that in part is helping the chicken to move its leg like this, kind of do leg lifts, and then also aiding an extension of the leg. Then we have another small muscle right here that's just in front of our ginormous iliotibialis. This is called the Sartorius muscle. And I mentioned the Sartorius because the Sartorius is something that humans have as well. So it connects from the hip down to this inner surface of the thigh. So in a chicken, we're just seeing it as one kind of straight strip of muscle. But in a human, our thighs are oriented like this. This is not going to go well probably, but that's okay. So this muscle, the Sartorius, ends up getting twisted across our thigh. So it starts on the outside of our hip up here, and then it attaches on the inside of our thigh way down here. So we have that Sartorius muscle too. Also, the iliotibialis is sometimes called the gluteus maximus of a bird, but birds don't really have a proper gluteal muscle in the same way that mammals do. So that's why there's not really much of a butt on a bird or a chicken. The closest we get is just this big fat thigh. And then back here, we're catching another glimpse of those hamstring muscles of the chicken. And then as we move down onto the leg of the chicken, so when you eat a chicken leg, this is it. This is a drumstick, right?
Oh yeah, I see it now.
Yeah. So here we said there's the thigh. When you eat the thigh, here's the drumstick. So this is the chicken's leg. So inside of the thigh, the bone in there is the femur. Then we have in here, it's called the tibiotarsus. So in birds, they fuse together a lot of different bones. The tibiotarsus is the tibia and the fibula, which we have in mammals, as well as some of the tarsal bones, the ankle bones way down here. And hopefully we'll get down to some of the bone later. But for now, let's talk about some of these muscles. So we are seeing one really big muscle right here. And I said that the muscle names will often tell you something about what they attach to or their location. So this muscle has a really nice, easy name. It's called the tibialis anterior. Tibialis because it's running along the tibia or tibiotarsus, and anterior because it's located on the anterior surface of the tibiotarsus. That's another name for the front surface of the tibiotarsus. So we can see that's a really big, powerful muscle. And then what we're getting a glimpse of back here is another muscle called the gastrocnemius. So we have this muscle too. It's located on the back of your thigh or the back of your tibia, back of your shin. So when you think of calf muscles and exercising your calf muscles, that's what this is. That's what the gastrocnemius is. And in a chicken, they're so big that they're not only located on the back of the shin, forming those calf muscles, but they actually, we see part of it. I'm gonna flip this guy now. We even see most of this muscle right back here is still gastrocnemius. We're seeing that on that inner surface, yeah. So these are, they have some really big gastrocnemius muscles. So now we'll flip back to this outer view. And here I'm peeling back one of the parts of the gastrocnemius so we can see some of the deeper musculature. And what I wanted to point out here is that there's a whole bunch of smaller muscles in here and all these tendons. So a lot of the muscles that are located on this part of the body, what we call the leg, actually will move the foot and the ankle. So the muscle is up here and then the tendons will all cluster around the ankle and they run down to the foot. Now the foot's been chopped off here, but you can see that big bunch of tendons. So when you eat a chicken leg, when you have a drumstick and you're finding a lot of chewy bits in there, that's because there's all of these tendons, all those little white squiggly things there. And when you eat a turkey leg, sometimes you see, here's one tendon that I pulled out. Sometimes you get something that's actually hard and kind of long and pokey that you pull out. That's because in animals that are bigger, these tendons ossify, so they kind of turn into bone. And we find ossified tendons in a lot of dinosaurs too. And fun fact, your body is also set up the same way. So a lot of the muscles that move your foot and ankle are actually located on your calf.
Is that the Achilles tendon?
The Achilles is going to be this guy right here. This really big, thick one. Yeah, thanks for asking about that, Gabe. So your Achilles tendon, also known as the common calcaneal tendon, you have a few muscles that are kind of all going to converge in that one tendon, but mostly that's where your gastrocnemius muscles, those calf muscles, are going to attach to your heel. Cool. So even your gastrocnemius muscles, they're not moving this part of the body, they're not moving the leg, they're actually moving your ankle joint. They're moving the foot. Cool.
I'm like moving my foot as you're talking. I was like, oh, okay. So what are we cutting into now, Jessie?
So what I am now doing is reflecting this big, huge muscle, our pectoralis major, because I want to show you all the muscles that are deep to it, that are underneath it.
What do you mean when you say reflecting?
I mean that I'm going to cut it like on one end, but not on the other, so it can flap open like the pages of a book.
Or a fillet.
Or a fillet.
That's what filleting is, right?
I think so.
I watch enough cooking shows.
Surprise, this is actually our new cooking show. Instead of Fossil Friday Chats, we're launching a new initiative.
Please don't get me started, because I want to do that. As if we don't have enough projects.
I know.
Oh, that's cool. Ooh, that's very cool. So, we're seeing all kinds of goodies under here. Muscles come in layers, right? You don't just have usually a single muscle that moves, that does one job, only one muscle that moves a certain joint or part of your body. You'll have a lot of muscles that contribute to it, and that's what gives us the ability to do nuanced movements, so we're not just like robots. So anyway, muscles come in layers, and it's always fun to peel back that outer layer, superficial layer, and see what is underneath. So here, I kind of actually have, this is our pectoralis major, and let's orient ourselves. This end is where the neck was, and so that direction is toward the tail end of the chicken. So here's our pectoralis major being reflected. And this little guy peeking through is the furcula. So this is bone. This is what we call the wishbone.
Oh!
Try it again. get a good view of that on camera. Okay, there we go. There's the wishbone. Yeah, so I noticed that poking through it. I was like, what is that? And I felt it. Oh, it's really hard. That's bone. So that's where the wishbone is. That's part of it. It's gotten broken, unfortunately. We can't see it yet, but I can feel it. So we're looking now down on the chicken. This is our stump of a neck that's remaining, and here's those. Here is the pectoralis muscles. So the furcula, that wishbone, is buried deep inside of these pectoralis muscles right here. It's one of the sets of muscles that attaches to them. So we're talking now about the flight muscles. So the furcula, that wishbone, is very important for anchoring the muscles of flight. Okay. Thank you.
That's why birds, and this chicken in particular, they have very pronounced pectoral muscles, right? Those are all for flight adaptations.
Yeah, super duper important for flight. So this is our pectoralis major muscle that we have reflected. We're looking at this ventral view of the bird again. And we're seeing another muscle underneath it here. So this is what we would call the chicken tender. So when you buy tenders in the store, that's what it is. But the scientific name for this muscle is the supracoracoideus.
Hi, I'll have the supracoracoideus 3-piece.
With barbecue sauce, please.
Ranch.
Yeah, ranch is always the way to go with chicken tenders, for sure. So this muscle has a really cool and important job. We said earlier that the pectoralis major, its job is the downstroke. So it's like bringing your arms together. This muscle here, supracoracoideus, is the upstroke. So it's a smaller muscle. It doesn't require as much force to lift the wings back up after bringing them down, because when they bring them down, that's when they're bringing them down against the force of their body weight and the wind around them. Bringing them up is easy, so it's a smaller muscle. But what's weird here is that this muscle is located on the ventral surface of the bird, or the ventral area on the breastbone, which we'll get to in a second. In most other animals, including humans, the muscles that lift our arms up are located on our back. But in birds, they've taken one of those muscles, they've made it really big and relocated it to the opposite of the back, to that belly surface. And that's because birds are they're trying to centralize most of their mass in one place, so they are able to have more stable flight than they would if they had a lot of mass on top of their body and below it. But this muscle, because it's lifting the wing, it still has to insert on that top surface of the wing, one of the wing bones, the humerus. It still has to insert on the dorsal surface of the humerus, you could say. So what's cool is the muscle tendon is going to actually pass through a hole called the...
Can you turn it around a little bit?
I will. Mm-hmm. That muscle tendon passes through a hole called the triosseal foramen, which we're seeing right here. Yeah. So here's the muscle diving into this foramen. So the probe and the scissors are showing you the foramen. So triosseal, that means 3 bones. So it's a hole, a foramen, formed by 3 bones. That furcula, the wishbone, which we talked about earlier. And by the way, that broke off when I was dissecting this out. So it used to be coming out right here. So here's our bit of furcula, half of the wishbone. The furcula, a bone called the coracoid, which is right here, and the scapula, which is the shoulder blade. We can't see it in this view. So we're seeing the muscle, it's going to be becoming tendon passing through this foramen. So part of the supracoracoideus passes through here so that it can wrap around in a pulley-like fashion and attach to the dorsal surface of the wing. And it can therefore lift the wing even though it's located ventrally.
That's awesome.
I love evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty wild, right?
Very cool adaptation.
Also something I noticed about the furcula, when it broke off. So this really is an indicator that this truly is a juvenile chicken, as the wrapper said. This is not an older adult chicken. So both ends of the bone here kind of have a rough, jagged edge. So that shows us, that indicates that they weren't, the bone was still growing. The two ends of the wishbone weren't fused together completely in the middle yet. And that's why it broke off so easily when I was dissecting.
Oh, I know this term. The something plate.
Growth plate.
Growth plate. I have a degree.
It's all coming back to you.
It's all coming back to me now.
And now for karaoke.
Okay.
Now we're looking at the wing of the chicken, or the chicken's arm, because that's really all it is. This is in ventral view again, so the belly surface. So we're seeing a little bit of that pectoralis major muscle here. And again, this direction is toward the head, and oh, hard to see. The other direction is toward the tail. So just like in us, the bird's arm has three major parts. It has an upper arm, in which we would see the humerus, or the first arm bone. Then there's a forearm. So in humans, as mammals, we have a radius and ulna in that forearm. In birds, there's also a separate radius and ulna. And then the third part of the wing is the hand. So birds still have a hand, just like us, except instead of having 5 fingers and 5 hand bones, they have reduced their number of digits and their number of hand bones and fused a lot of that together. So here we get another special bone. It's called the carpometacarpus. So they're fusing together carpals and metacarpals, the hand bones and wrist bones. And they also have fewer fingers than us. Birds have only 3 fingers. So this finger is the first digit. So that's like the bird thumb. And it's actually still fairly large, because having being able to make slight movements of this thumb allows them to more precisely control their flight. And then digit 2 is the biggest one. So we're seeing the tip of digit 2 here. And the tip of digit 3 should be somewhere over here, but it got cut off. There's actually a feather that attaches directly to the tip of that third digit. And when you're skinning a bird, it's really easy to rip off that little tiny finger when you're removing the feathers on the skin. So that's long gone, but it should be there. So now that we're oriented with our general anatomy, oh, there's another feature I should mention actually. So we have lots of muscle on bone here and here and here. But here we have a triangle of skin and soft tissue. This is called the patagium of the bird. And you can see as I stretch the wing out, it's getting tight. As I relax the wing, it's getting looser. So that patagium, this fleshy area, is also an important structural part of the wing. And we'll come back to a little bit more about that patagium in a minute. But first I wanted to point out a couple of muscles. So we're seeing 2 big fat muscles here on the upper arm of the bird, so covering up the humerus. This one is the biceps brachii. So just like we have a biceps muscle in our arm, here it is in a bird. And the job of this muscle is to help flex that elbow. And then we have a triceps muscle on the back part of the humerus, right here. So a big old triceps. Again, 2 muscles just like we have in our own body. You may be familiar with working out your biceps and your triceps when you're at the gym. So for this next set of muscles, I'm going to go ahead and flip the bird so that we're seeing it, a dorsal view of the wing. So we can see some back muscles here. So even though I'm getting tickled by the dog,
Process.
even though we said that some of the muscles that are, the big muscle that's used to lift the wing is the supracoracoideus. So the supracoracoideus is going to help to do this kind of action, and that's located on that ventral surface on top of the breastbone. There's still some small muscles that are on the back itself, and again, what's really cool is there's some of the same muscles we have. So there's latissimus dorsi right here. So if you work out your lats at the gym, that's what you're working out. As you can see, they're rather small in a bird. And then here's a muscle called teres major, which is another back muscle that we too have. So here is the actual back of the chicken. And now we're looking at the back surface or dorsal surface of the upper arm right here. So this is the deltoideus muscle. Again, a muscle you're probably familiar with if you go to the gym and you exercise, you work out your delts, right? Your shoulders. So here's the delts of the chicken, deltoideus. Here's another little muscle called teres minor. And then this muscle is a really cool one. It's called patagialis longus. So again, let's think about what the name tells us. Patagialis, that means it's attaching to the patagium. Remember, we said the patagium is this kind of triangle of skin and membranous tissue that's composing part of the wing. Longus just means it's long relative to any other muscles that attach to the patagium. So the patagialis longus, it's attaching to some bones up here, but here it's just attaching to soft tissue. And it's actually one of a whole set of muscles. There's quite a few, 3 or 4 muscles depending on the bird, that attach to the patagialis, or to the patagium here. So I said it's an important part of the wing. So being able to control the tension in the patagium is something important for the bird to control its flight in a very nuanced manner. So here's our patagium and patagialis longus. You can see it's actually a pretty big, pretty substantial muscle. All right, there's a whole bunch of muscles on the forearm of the chicken, but the vast majority of them, their job is to move the fingers and the wrist. So there's so many of them, we're not going to give them all names, but they come in 2 major big groups. Ones that extend the fingers and the wrist joint, and ones that flex the fingers and the wrist joint. It's a little harder to see the flexion there. So extenders and flexors. And we can see, especially right here nicely, all of these are tendons of those flexors that are going around this little joint bend and attaching onto the hand of the chicken. And this is exactly how it is in humans too. Most of the bone or the muscles that move your fingers and your wrist and your hand are actually located on your forearm. So there are many muscles in the forearm, and the job of most of them is moving your fingers and your hand and your wrist, which is really cool, I always think. Very counterintuitive. Distracted by the cuteness, Gabe!
It's so adorable!
Alright, now I'm just going to start cutting through muscles. And I guess we'll just mostly try to get down to bone, but I am going to look for a couple of major nerve groups, which would be super duper awesome to see. So, it always hurts a little bit to do this after I've spent so much time dissecting something.
It's just time to go out.
And don't you lick my gloves.
No. He just wants to learn. The boy wants to learn.
He wants to eat.
Alright, so what we have done now, this is, I tried to dissect out one of my favorite things. I wasn't sure if I could see it on a supermarket chicken, and it turns out not only can you see it, you can see it beautifully. So once again, we're looking at the chicken in dorsal view here. So here's one of its thighs, here's a wing, over here at this end is where the neck, stump of the neck is, here's the tail end down here. And what we've done is to cut through the back muscles, remove the shoulder blade. I can feel it with my finger. The scapula is right here. So it's kind of almost like I started to chop off the arm, except I didn't go all the way. So we're really right, I said this is the stump of the neck, right? We can see that wiggling. So this is where the spinal column is, all the vertebrae are. So we're right next to the spinal column. I can feel vertebrae with my finger as I press right here. And what the probe is under is actually a set of nerves. So you can see they're actually pretty darn large. When I tug at them, I can feel that they're pretty strong. This particular set of nerves is called the brachial plexus. Brachial means arm, and when we say plexus in terms of nerves, we mean that, as you can see, this looks kind of a mess, right? These things are coming together and they're separating, and they're coming together and separating, so it forms this kind of weird tangled network of nerves. That's what we call a plexus. The brachial plexus is super duper important because this is what is providing innervation, sensory, so you can feel things, and motor, so you can move muscles, to all the muscles of the shoulder and the arm. So it's really important. Humans also have a brachial plexus that looks not unlike this brachial plexus here in the chicken. So what we're seeing here is the base of the brachial plexus. So this is where spinal nerves are coming off of the spinal cord that's housed inside of this vertebral column. Then they come together and they merge, and then they have their weird branching pattern, and then they're going into the muscles of the shoulder and the arm, as we see here, because those are the structures that they supply. So there it is, folks, the brachial plexus of a chicken.
Awesome, Jessie. This was amazing to observe. Do you have any other tips for us regarding dissection? Is this something that we'd be able to do at home?
It absolutely is, actually. So you can go, anyone can go to the store and buy a chicken. You don't even have to have a big tray, fancy tray to do this in. You can go to the store, you can buy yourself a chicken. There's a fairly inexpensive, really cool, helpful book called The Manual of Ornithology. If you're interested in this, it goes over a lot of the basics of bird anatomy, including many of the muscles that we talked about today. You could honestly probably use a small paring knife to get through most of the skinning, and then, like I said, from there on out, it's mostly hands. You can use your hands to do a lot of work. You can use a small pair of sharp manicure scissors to... I wasn't even using the scissors to cut most of the time. I just like to use the tip of the scissors to help me separate muscles, remove fascia, etc. So you can do this very easily in your own home, probably with household items. Just wash them really well afterwards. And then the final step, which we don't have time to show you today, but which is also very cool and very doable in the home, is making your chicken stock. Then save all the bones, and you have your very own chicken skeleton.
You can mount it.
Mm-hmm. That might be a little ambitious, but yeah.
Now, Dr. Atterholt, would you have any advice for any up-and-coming young paleontologists, anatomists who might be interested in this line of work?
I would say, just first off, what was really nice about this line of work is that it is easy to do a lot of self-training. There's a lot of resources available to you with the internet and books like the Manual of Ornithology that will help you start learning anatomy. And then you can buy head of a pig at some supermarkets, or a whole chicken. There's so much you can get even just at the grocery store to help you start learning anatomy. And in the world of paleontology, there's several different kind of career paths that one can follow, but being an anatomist is a great one, because then you're able to get a job teaching anatomy at a medical school like myself and many of my colleagues do. So it's a great way to be able to find a job and also do something cool and useful with respect to your paleontological research.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jessie, for doing this dinosaur dissection with us. And like Jessie said, you can do it at home. Just make sure you do it with parental supervision, you have their permission, and just do as, safety precautions when you're handling any of the specimens, as we'll call them, and any of the tools. But like Jessie said, there are a lot of really cool tutorials on how to do this at home.
And also, one final note, just exercise patience. I always tell my students that dissection is, you have to find the zen in the process and take a while. So we've condensed this video a lot for you, but it took several hours to do even this very basic dissection. So don't expect like in 20 minutes you're going to be able to see everything that we showed you today. Just take your time with removing the fat and the fascia, separating the muscles, trying to get down to stuff.
Yep, that was the magic of Gabe's editing.
But I think it's also like, just have fun with it sometimes, right?
Have fun
like,
with it, yeah.
You're learning anatomy hands-on, you're holding the muscles, you're learning the bone parts. Take notes while you're doing it, and just get in there. Well, that does it for today's special episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, if you like this program and want to support programs like it at the Alf Museum and the Western Science Center, you can find links on how to do that in the description below. And as always, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel for more stories from the world of paleontology. We'll see you all in the next episode.